Millionaire can't believe it when he recognizes the waitress. This story will touch your heart. The knight in New York wore a gown of splendor, embroidered with thousands of golden lights stretching from the legendary avenues to the cloud-kissing skyscrapers. Inside the Astoria Hotel, host of the annual gala for the city's elite in architecture and real estate, everything shimmered as if the entire city had poured its brilliance into this one place. Crystal glasses of wine gleamed under chandelier light. Evening gowns swept past like liquid silk. Laughter and music mingled into a symphony of luxury. Emma Valdez moved quietly through that sea of people, like a silent note in a grand composition. Her black server's uniform, buttoned to the collar, turned her into part of the backdrop no one truly saw. The silver tray in her hands carried chilled champagne flutes, each step a practiced motion, graceful enough to vanish from attention, swift enough to meet the whims of powerful guests. She did not belong here. She knew it, and truth be told, she didn't want to. This world, with its calculated handshakes, hollow compliments, and smiles that existed only when watched, was as foreign as a dream she had never wished to dream. "Tonight's special," her manager had murmured just before the gala began. "The guest of honor is Daniel Hawthorne, youngest architect ever to win the Pritzker Prize, CEO of Hawthorne Design Group, a genius who turns every blueprint into an icon." Emma had offered only a faint smile. Another powerful man, another reason for guests to lift themselves a rung higher. She had no idea that name would change everything. A classic jazz tune drifted through the air, reminding her it was time to move toward the VIP section. She passed round tables draped in white linen, crystal chandeliers glittering like a winter sky, eyes glancing her way only to turn quickly back. Eyes belonging to people who believed the world existed to serve them. And then she saw him. The world around Emma seemed to hold its breath. At the far end of the room, beside a small group in quiet conversation, stood a tall man in a charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection. But it wasn't his polished appearance or composed presence that drew her. It was his eyes, deep blue eyes carrying an ocean of memories. Eyes she knew better than her own reflection. A heartbeat skipped, shards of memory, summer afternoons on the orphanage playground, laughter echoing down worn hallways, whispered promises beneath a star-filled sky. Rushed back all at once. The boy named Daniel stood before her in sharper detail than any dream could conjure. He turned his head. Those blue eyes searched the crowd, then locked on hers without hesitation, without doubt. And when his lips moved, she saw it clearly. Lila, her true name, the name known only in those orphanage years. The silver tray in Emma's hands grew unbearably heavy. She drew a deep breath, but it couldn't slow the pounding of her heart. In that room of light and laughter, she knew the past had just found its way back. Emma stepped back, breath caught in her throat. The conversations around her blurred into a distant hum, as if coming from another world. She turned almost instinctively, weaving through the laughing, chatting crowd. No one noticed her, and that was exactly what she needed. The door to the staff area closed behind her, shutting out the bright lights and glitter of the ballroom. Only a narrow hallway remained, lit by cold white neon, filled with the low hum of the air conditioner and faint aromas drifting from the main kitchen. Emma leaned against the wall, her hand still gripping the tray as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. 17 years. 17 years since that boy had vanished from her life without a single goodbye. She had convinced herself that Daniel was only part of her childhood, a chapter permanently closed. But the moment those eyes had found her, every wall she'd built came crashing down. "Emma!" She startled. Daniel stood at the entrance to the hallway, tall, moving slowly but deliberately, as if afraid to frighten her. The charcoal suit and confident posture belonged to a man used to commanding grand stages, but the eyes, those same eyes from long ago, trembled with an emotion hard to name. "I need to talk to you," his voice low and rough, nothing like the speeches she'd heard him give on television. Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to run, another part ached to hear the answers. She nodded slightly, allowing him to guide her down the corridor, through heavy doors into a small meeting room upstairs. But just as Daniel opened the door, a bright, confident female voice rang out. "Daniel, I've been looking everywhere for you." Ada, the woman, swept in, Blonde hair styled in soft waves, a striking red dress hugging every curve. Clara Bennett, famed real estate investor, her face a fixture in financial magazines. Without a moment's pause, she looped her arms around Daniel's neck and pressed a kiss to his lips, equal parts possessive and performative. Emma froze. A chill ran down her spine. She didn't wait for Daniel to explain, or perhaps she was afraid to hear it. She turned sharply, her footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. "Emma!" Daniel's voice followed, laced with surprise and plea. But she had already disappeared into the flow of staff beyond, leaving behind the lights, the music, and the past that had only just come alive again. The night breeze slipped through the door leading to the hotel's back balcony, carrying with it the scents of the city, the damp air from the Hudson River, a faint trace of exhaust, and the sweet whisper of a nearby bakery. Emma stood at the iron railing, both hands gripping the cold metal, willing herself not to shake. She didn't know how Daniel had found her, but when she heard the slow, deliberate footsteps behind her, she knew it was him even before he spoke. "Emma." She closed her eyes. Most of her wanted to turn away, but another part, the part that was still a 12-year-old in her memories, ached to hear his voice this close again. "Lila," he corrected softly, his voice low and deep, like a note falling straight into the locked ears. "I'm sorry for startling you, but I can't let you walk away again without knowing why." Emma turned. The warm light from inside spilled over him, framing his face like an old photograph. But those eyes, they hadn't changed at all, still able to summon every summer afternoon, every burst of laughter, every whispered promise beneath the old tree in the orphanage yard. "You disappeared," she said, her voice quiet but sharp as glass. "One day you were there, the next you weren't. No letter, no message, just nothing." Daniel swallowed, his gaze flickering. "I didn't have a choice. The adoptive family came in the middle of the night. They said if I tried to contact you, they'd have you move somewhere else. I was 15 and..." He stopped, drew a deep breath. "I was scared, Lila. Scared of losing you completely." Emma stayed silent. The anger she'd carried for years was still there, but tangled now with the unsettling realization that the truth was far more complicated than she'd believed. "I searched for you," he continued. "I went back to Maine, asked everyone I could, but you'd vanished from every record. I thought, maybe you'd forgotten." A sad smile touched her lips. No one forgets the only person who ever truly saw them. In that moment, between the glow of the lights and the distant hum of the city, they both seemed to know this conversation was only the beginning. "Meet me tomorrow," Emma said softly, surprising herself with the words. "We need more than a few minutes on a cold balcony." Daniel nodded. "I'll be anywhere you want me to be." That afternoon ended in a strange quiet. The words left unsaid hung between them like unfinished notes in a melody. When Emma left the cafe, Daniel remained seated, his eyes following her until her silhouette disappeared around the corner. He knew that if he wanted to continue this song, it would take more than brief conversations. He would need to find a way to reach the corners of memory they had both kept hidden. They met again the next afternoon at a small cafe on the corner of 18th and Lexington, a place Emma often visited on her rare days off. The cafe had only a few tables, exposed red brick walls and low-hanging warm lights. In the corner stood an old violin displayed as decoration, its strings slack but its graceful shape intact. Daniel arrived early. He chose a table by the window where he could see everyone coming and going. When Emma stepped in, the bell above the door chimed softly. He rose immediately, as if afraid she might change her mind and turn away. "Black coffee?" he asked as she sat down. "Still remember," Emma replied. Not exactly cold, but not yet open either. They began with safe topics. Emma's work at the restaurant, Daniel's recent project in Singapore, the erratic New York weather. But between each answer, their eyes met and lingered longer than necessary. Finally, Daniel set his cup down. "I remember you always carrying your violin at the orphanage. When you were sad, when you were happy, you always played." Emma gave a small smile, unsure if it was for the memory or surprise that he still remembered. "Music was the only thing I thought I was good at," she said. "But music school was expensive. When my foster father got sick, I had to quit to work. Do you still play? Not as much as before. Her gaze drifted toward the old violin in the corner. There are pieces I've never finished, like a part of me was left behind. Daniel was silent, twirling his spoon slowly. Same for me, he said at last. There are buildings I've designed but never built. Sketches left unfinished because something was missing or someone. That afternoon stretched longer than either had planned. From the cafe, they walked through Union Square Park, sitting on a wooden bench watching children play tag. Emma spoke of the free music classes she once attended, her dream of opening one for orphaned children. Daniel listened intently, asking for details, his gaze focused as if every word mattered. A week later, they met again, this time in Emma's practice room, where she occasionally taught beginners. Daniel stood in the doorway, silent, watching her guide a young girl in tuning the strings. When the student left, he stepped closer, brushing his fingers lightly over the instrument. Your sound is still the same as back then, he said. Emma blushed, pretending to busy herself putting the violin away. But when Daniel offered to walk her home, she didn't refuse. It was raining that day. By the time they emerged from the subway station near Emma's place, the downpour had turned into a silver curtain. Neither had an umbrella. They ran for the awning of a closed shop, breaths mingling with the sound of the rain. Daniel looked at her, a few wet strands clinging to her cheek. I've wanted to do this since the balcony, he said softly. Do what? He stepped closer, gently lifting her chin. The first kiss came like a long-awaited note, slow, tender, but with a storm surging beneath. The rain kept falling, but Emma could only hear her own heartbeat, and some part of her knew. The distance was beginning to close. In the days that followed, everything moved like a gentle melody. They saw each other more often, late dinners after Emma's shifts, rare morning coffees before Daniel headed to a construction site, brief but warm messages exchanged amid busy schedules. But then Emma began to feel a strange pressure, not from Daniel, but from herself. She realized she anticipated his messages so much that she couldn't focus when they didn't come. Evenings when he was stuck in long meetings left her restless, haunted by a familiar feeling, waiting and then losing. One evening after returning from a walk in Central Park, she sat before her violin in the practice room, staring at the unfinished sheet music. The notes looked as if they were trapped between the staves, just like she felt now. She was afraid that if she let things go further, one day Daniel might disappear again. The next morning, she wrote a short letter. Daniel, I need time. Everything is happening too fast, and I'm afraid of losing myself in all of it. Please don't look for me for the next few days. Emma. She placed it in an envelope and asked the receptionist at his office building to deliver it directly to him. Daniel received it at noon. He read it once, then again, as if searching for something between the lines. His hand tightened around the paper, but he didn't tear it. 3 days later, exactly 72 hours, Daniel showed up at a place Emma never thought he'd remember. A small rooftop garden in Brooklyn, where she had once said she came to hear herself think. Emma was sitting on a wooden bench, surrounded by pots of lavender. When his shadow stretched across the tiled floor, she looked up, slightly surprised. I remembered, Daniel said, his voice low but unhurried. I remembered you telling me about this place, and I thought, if you needed space, this is the only place I should come. She said nothing, but she didn't leave. I'm scared too, Emma, he continued. Scared that all of this is too good to be true. But this time, I'm not leaving. Not ever again. The walls she had built around herself began to crack, little by little. They sat on that rooftop for a long while, speaking little, letting the wind and the scent of lavender fill the space between them. The sunset painted the brick walls in honey gold, while the city lights began to flicker in the distance like stars on the ground. When Emma finally stood to leave, Daniel didn't try to stop her. He simply said, Tomorrow, if you want to see me, I'll be here. A simple sentence promising nothing but presence, yet it weighed as much as an oath. The next morning, Emma woke with a rare sense of calm, but only a few hours later, a message from Elena, a colleague at the restaurant, shattered it. Emma, have you seen the news this morning? On her phone screen appeared a photo of Daniel standing beside Clara on the cover of a financial magazine. The bold headline read, Hawthorne heir to wed? Emma read the headline once, then again, as if hoping it would turn into something else. But it stayed the same. Bold letters above photos of Daniel and Clara smiling together, leaving an upscale restaurant. Her phone buzzed. Daniel was calling. She let it ring 4 times before answering. "Emma, don't believe what you just saw." "And what exactly am I supposed to believe?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to stretch the distance between them. "Clara hired a paparazzo. She wanted this rumor out to pressure me into an investment deal." "It doesn't exist, Emma. There's no engagement, nothing." "And the photos?" "A business dinner. She took advantage of the moment." He paused as if weighing something. "I want to explain in person. Tonight. Please." Emma was silent for a few seconds before agreeing, though her heart was still crowded with doubt. That evening, Daniel appeared outside the restaurant where she worked. He wore a white shirt, tie undone, fatigue etched into his features. "Come with me," was all he said. The car took them to a skyscraper in Midtown, venue for a major press conference in the architecture world. Outside, dozens of reporters waited, cameras raised like a wall of light. As they stepped out, Daniel's name was shouted from every direction. A few lenses swung toward Emma, flashes making her squint. Instinct told her to step back, but Daniel's hand held hers firmly. On the press stage, Daniel walked to the microphone, Emma standing beside him. The room fell silent. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear," Daniel said, his voice low but unwavering. "The recent rumors are false. I am not engaged to Clara Bennett, and I have never intended to be. The only person I want to be with is standing right next to me." A ripple of murmurs swept through the room. Daniel turned to look at Emma, his gaze steady. "Her name is Emma Valdez," he continued, "and I don't just respect her for her talent or her kind heart. I love her. That will not change no matter what anyone says." Emma felt his hand tighten slightly, as if passing her a promise without words. After that, the conference returned to talk of a new architectural project. But for Emma, all the sounds felt far away. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, and the words "I love her" echoing still. When they left the building, the flashlight still followed. But this time, Emma didn't bow her head. Her hand remained woven with Daniel's, and they walked through the sea of light as if nothing could shake them. The press conference ended and they returned in silence. Not for lack of words, but because both were letting what had just happened settle. Emma knew that amid the camera flashes and whispered gossip, Daniel had chosen to stand by her, without a moment's hesitation. And that choice planted in her a new kind of trust, still fragile, but warm enough to last the night. 2 days later, Daniel called Emma and simply said, "I want to show you a place." The car took them to a high-rise in Manhattan. When the elevator doors opened, Emma stepped into a completely empty apartment, lit only by the warm glow spilling through wide windows that framed the city skyline. In the middle of the living room stood the only object, a sleek black electric violin on its stand, beside a chair and a brand new music stand. Emma froze. "Daniel, what is this?" "Not what," he replied with a faint smile, "but for whom? I remember you saying there were pieces you'd never finished. This is your space, to write, to play, whenever you want." She moved closer, fingertips brushing the cool surface of the instrument. A single note rang out as she drew the bow, its tone both clear and deep, as if the room itself was listening. "Daniel, Her voice caught. "I don't know what to say. Just use it," he said, "and let me hear the piece you've never finished." Emma smiled, taking her seat. The bow trembled slightly in her hand. Then the music began to fill the room, a melody once left incomplete, now whole and unbroken. Each note was a fragment of memory, a piece of her heart, and Daniel listened as if it were the only treasure in the world. When the piece ended, she looked up. Daniel was watching her, pride in his eyes mingled with something deeper, something that needed no name to be understood. When the last note faded into silence, Emma remained seated as if afraid that standing would make the moment vanish. Daniel stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder, a touch gentle enough to steady, yet strong enough to send her heart fluttering. "Keep the violin," he said. "Think of it as a promise, that there's more to come." Emma smiled and nodded. She didn't know what more meant, But in Daniel's eyes at that moment, one thing was certain. He was preparing something extraordinary. She had no idea that only a few weeks later, he would take her to a place he had kept hidden for years, a garden no one but him had ever stepped into. One weekend afternoon, Daniel told Emma to dress warmly and bring comfortable shoes. He didn't say where they were going, only smiling mysteriously when she asked. The car left Manhattan, crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, and drove deeper into a quiet residential area. They stopped in front of an old iron gate, surrounded by maple trees shedding golden leaves. Daniel took a key from his pocket, unlocked the gate, and led her inside. A narrow stone path took them through a hedge, opening into a space Emma had never seen. A wide garden, meticulously designed, with a round pond at its center, climbing roses lining the walkways, and hundreds of small lights strung above, casting a warm golden glow. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, walking slowly as if afraid to disturb the stillness. "I designed this place when I first started my career," Daniel said, his eyes sweeping over the garden like he was seeing a part of himself. "But I've never let anyone in. I wanted to keep it for a moment, and for one person." They strolled along the flower-lined path, stopping beside the pond. The water mirrored the twilight sky, where the first stars had begun to appear. Daniel turned to her, taking her hands. "I searched for you for years, and when I found you again, I knew I would never let you disappear again." Before Emma could answer, he sank to one knee and took a small blue velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a deep blue sapphire gleamed like a piece of the ocean, encircled by a halo of tiny diamonds. "Emma Valdez," he said, voice low but steady, "will you marry me?" Emma brought her hand to her mouth. Tears welled, but her smile was radiant. "Yes, Daniel. Yes." His laugh came out soft with relief as he slid the ring onto her finger. They embraced beneath the golden lights and the faint scent of roses, as if the whole garden had just witnessed a promise meant to last forever. That night, the garden was still glowing when they left, but Emma knew the real light she carried was in the hand holding hers. Each step along the path out seemed to etch a new chapter into their story, a chapter that began with a yes and would end with a promise for life. The wedding took place on a gentle autumn morning, in the secret garden Daniel had opened to Emma the night he proposed. Only family, close friends, and a few colleagues attended. No press, no camera flashes, only the sound of a violin under a white floral arch and maple leaves drifting softly down the path. Emma wore a soft satin gown, her hair in a neat bun, with a few loose strands brushing her cheeks. Daniel didn't take his eyes off her from the moment she walked in. When they exchanged rings, neither said much, because every word had already been lived, not just spoken. After the ceremony, a small reception was held right in the garden. They cut the cake together, danced under the golden lights, and Emma played a violin piece just for Daniel, the once unfinished melody, now complete. The first year after the wedding passed in days that were both peaceful and full of change. Emma continued teaching music, opening a free class for orphaned children. Daniel supported her in every project, even joining some charity performances himself. They kept their small traditions: Sunday morning coffee, walks in Union Square whenever they could, and visiting the secret garden on every anniversary. The following spring, Emma held a pregnancy test in her hand, 2 clear red lines. She sat on the kitchen chair, laughing and crying at once, when Daniel walked in. He froze, eyes wide, then came over and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Is it real?" he whispered. "It's real," she nodded, her voice breaking. "And it's twins." Daniel laughed, a sound full of wonder and joy. "We're going to have a family, bigger than I ever dreamed." When summer arrived, they sat together in the garden again. This time, not just to watch the flowers bloom, but to talk about names, stories, and a future they both believed in more than ever. The days spent awaiting the arrival of their 2 little ones filled their home with laughter, threaded with moments of nervous anticipation. Each night, Daniel would place his hand on Emma's belly, listening to the soft kicks like the very first hellos. In those moments, they realized happiness wasn't only in the grand gestures, but in the small, everyday rituals that repeated themselves. And then one autumn afternoon, as the golden sunset washed over the secret garden, Daniel and Emma knew they were ready to write the final chapter of this story. A chapter that wouldn't close but would open into a whole new life. The birth happened on a winter morning when New York was still wrapped in the thin layer of snow from the night before. In the bright delivery room, Emma gripped Daniel's hand, her breath coming fast but her gaze steady. The first cry rang out, then a second, two voices blending like the most beautiful duet they had ever heard. Daniel bent down, eyes glistening, as the doctor placed two tiny angels into his arms, each wrapped in a soft white blanket. He turned to Emma, unable to stop the tears. "We did it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You were incredible." Emma smiled, exhausted but radiant. She gently took one baby and pressed them to her chest. "Hello, my love," she murmured, tears mingling with her smile. They named them Lucas and Luna. Lucas had Daniel's jet black hair, while Luna had Emma's warm brown eyes. The first weeks passed like a dream, filled with cries, laughter, sleepless nights, and quiet moments when all four of them sat together on the couch, listening only to each other's breathing. Daniel became a devoted father, learning to change diapers, holding a baby in one arm while stirring soup with the other. Emma sang lullabies on her violin, and Lucas and Luna often drifted into sleep within minutes. One afternoon, as snow began to fall softly outside, Daniel and Emma sat in the living room, the twins sleeping peacefully in their arms. "I think it's time we make some plans for the future," Daniel said. Emma looked up. "What are you thinking?" "I want us to turn the secret garden into a place for the whole family," he replied. "Not just ours, but where Lucas and Luna can grow up, run, learn music, and where you can teach other children." Emma was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I want that too, and I want to keep what we started here, to show people that love can rebuild anything lost." The following spring, they made it happen. The garden was expanded with a play area for children, a small corner with a white piano and Emma's violin. In the afternoons, Lucas and Luna lay on a blanket, listening to their mother play, while Daniel trimmed roses along the path. One late summer day, as the sun began to set, the four of them sat together on the wooden bench by the pond. Lucas held his mother's hand. Luna rested her head on her father's shoulder. Emma and Daniel looked at each other, saying nothing, yet knowing the same truth. Every hardship, every separation, and every lost year had led them to this moment. The sunset bathed the garden in gold, its light dancing on the shimmering surface of the pond. And there, between the sound of water, the laughter of children, and the faint scent of roses, they knew they were living what they once thought impossible, a perfect happiness. Autumn returned, dressing the secret garden in brilliant gold. Lucas and Luna ran around the pond, their laughter echoing through the scent of roses. Emma sat by her violin, drawing gentle notes that seemed to embrace the entire garden. Daniel stood behind her, quietly watching, not just his wife and children, but the journey that had led them here. From orphaned beginnings to years apart, to the moment they found each other again, it all felt woven into the melody now filling the air. When the music ended, Emma looked up, meeting Daniel's gaze. No words were needed. They both understood. Every loss and every challenge had been steps leading to this moment. And in the stretch of sunset light, the four of them sat together, believing that true happiness wasn't the absence of storms, but walking through them while keeping the light in their hearts.